In 1980, a typical recent year, Parliament passed 68 general public acts. With annotations, they take up 1,783 pages in these 2 volumes of Halsbury's statutes. These were only part of Parliament's legislative output. Nearly 2,000 statutory instruments, as well as numerous local and private acts, were also made or passed in that year. This deluge of legislation presents problems for both MPs and practitioners. The same text has to be first a bill for debate by MPs, most of whom are not lawyers, and afterwards an effective law. It must be kept as short as possible and must also conform to the technicalities of the law. In his recent book, Statute Law, Francis Bennion sets out a means of presenting legislation in a more comprehensible manner. Francis Bennion again.
Composite restatement is a way of retaining the wording of the Act while presenting it in a more helpful way to the user. A helpful analogy is the building brick. The building brick can be likened to the units of an act, the units of sense, the parts of sentences, which are the grammatical clauses. Take, for example, the overloaded formula, which is one of the most prevalent and most difficult aspects of parliamentary drafting. Remember the definition of burglary, which really covers 6 different offences in one set of words. I liken that to an inconvenient building, too large, straggling around. We want to use the bricks to make 6 smaller buildings. The building is dismantled, the bricks are numbered, and an architect designs the 6 smaller buildings. They use no additional bricks, but they use all the original bricks. And that is what restatement can do. With the overloaded formula, it can state each of the 6 offences separately, with a great gaining in clarity, as you see here from the restatement of the offence of burglary with intent to steal. A person is guilty of burglary if he enters a building or part of a building as a trespasser with intent to steal anything therein. Now, that is a fairly straightforward thing to understand. So much easier than the actual definition of burglary. The same thing could be done for the other 5 offences that definition covers. This technique of the overloaded formula is found in every Act of Parliament, pretty well in every section, and that the disentangling shown there can be done, needs some expertise, but it's not all that difficult, without losing 1 iota of the meaning of the law. And that is what restatement can do. It can tackle the other problems that we have seen. For example, the defined term. Let us look again at that passage about the insured person. This time we'll show it with the defined terms printed in bold so that you can see what they are. The reader is not misled into thinking when he reads employed person that simply means a person with a job. He knows that he has to go to the definition section of the Act and see just what the definition is. I want to show you how restatement can deal with the application technique. To begin with, we look at the section of the Consumer Credit Act, section 147, which applies Part 3. Section 147 is in Part 10, and it reads, "The provisions of Part 3, except section 40, apply to an ancillary credit business as they apply to a consumer credit business." Part 3 is about the licensing of consumer credit businesses and consumer hire businesses. Those are the two main types of business dealt with by the Act. But here in Part 10, the draftsman wanted to apply those 22 licensing sections in Part 3 to a different sort of business, an ancillary credit business. So the reader who is only interested in ancillary credit business has to read Part 3, keeping in mind certain modifications, which I'm not going to bother you with, but are there, as if they referred instead to the ancillary credit business. Now I'll just go to the first section in Part 3 to demonstrate what this involves. The first section is section 21, and it says, subject to this section, a license is required to carry on a consumer credit business or consumer hire business. 2. A local authority does not need a license to carry on a business. 3. A body corporate empowered by a public general act naming it to carry on a business does not need a license to do so. There you see, in wording relating to consumer credit and consumer hire, we have the requirement for a license, with exceptions in the case of local authorities and certain bodies corporate. But it says nothing there about the ancillary credit business, and we are thinking of a person who's interested only in that. So he has to keep in his head the modifications as he reads that section and all the other 22 sections of Part 3. I want to show you the part of the restatement that restates these provisions. There are two ways in which the application technique can be dealt with in restatement. Either you can write out again, the second time, the provisions applied in full with the modifications written in, and by doing that we would have another 22 sections or the equivalent in the restatement all about ancillary credit business and its licensing. That's one way of doing it. The other way is to produce a combined version where a single text deals with both types of case. And that, in fact, is what I have done in this restatement. I have produced a provision which deals with the licensing both of consumer credit and consumer hire, and also ancillary credit business. And here you see the text of that. It has a heading, General Provisions. It is broken up into numbered grammatical clauses, rather like the building bricks. 1. Either a standard license or a group license is required to carry on 2. A consumer credit business, or 3. A consumer hire business, or 4. An ancillary credit business, unless 5. The business is carried on by a local authority, or 6. The business is carried on by a body corporate which is empowered to carry it on by a public general act specifying the body corporate by name. I've mentioned the numbered clauses. This is for ease of reference. Say an argument in court addressed to a judge can refer precisely to the words to which attention is to be drawn. Next point, some of the terms are in single quotation marks. Standard license, group license, and so on. These are all defined terms.
Another feature of the restatement method is that the source of any restated material is always shown. Also, there's the analysis, which reproduces the headings and provides a bird's-eye view of the subject.